respected. The money you send will be guaranteed, and so on and so forth. So then the institution, what about your education program? Do we have the same kind of credits? You have, yes, your diplomas, can we recognize them? Can we recognize the diploma you have here in Caxias and at Laval? Is it the same thing or not? What about your medical system? What about the banking system? So we have to change laws, and this is what globalization does, is that, well, if you want to do this, let's do business, this is the law you have to change, I have to trust your courts, because if I want to sue you, will the judge be impartial or not? So that's very complicated, institution. The second one is cultural. Which cultural is, what's the place, for example, of women in society? What is the respect of minorities? Indigenous, Indians, for example. You have the same issues in Quebec as you have in Brazil. What about language? I'm talking about language. What about the manners, the way of doing things, and so on and so forth. And finally, the distance, the geographical distance. But the geographical distance is disappearing. To come from Quebec City, if I had a straight flight, it would be 12 hours in the air at 800 kilometers an hour. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. So these distances are disappearing slowly and gradually. And this is where the crisis is. The crisis between cultures that are very different are doing business, for example, a country like China. For us, it's very difficult because they have a dictatorship. They don't have the same institutions. They don't have the same laws. They don't have the same language. They don't have the same culture. And they're far from us. So for us, doing business with the Americans next door, it's easy. Yeah. And Mr. Trump is saying he's going to scrap the free trade agreement. So you can go ahead. Mm-hmm. The states who voted for him, they exist because of us in Quebec, because in Canada, because our economies have become so integrated now. And the distances are not there. I mean, we speak the same language. We have the same institutions. We've been working on institutions. The same with Mexico in the last 25 years. So you tell somebody in Quebec, why don't you do business with Brazil? Why should I do business with Brazil? I'm making $1 million a day doing business with the Americans. They're right next door. I don't have to take a plane. I just go by car. If I want to take a plane just for the fun of it, it's going faster. But no, it's not an easy question, but it's something that we have to go there.
Mm-hmm. And university, as we have today, the role model of university, do you think it will exist in the future? Or
yes. It will exist in the future. The same issues are going to exist in the future. It's always a question of money. Where does the money come from?
Because there are a lot of discussions about the university being extinct, for example, replaced by MOOCs or like Singularity University, this kind of business model.
Okay, well, I was telling you that we made giant progress in technology at Laval University, for example. I would easily put on the table, come and compare what we have to anything else. We're amongst the most advanced in the world. We have courses, for example, I'm coordinating a strategic management course. The course is given in class or it's given online. The woman who's teaching the online course, she's in Texas, in Houston. Okay? And she's originally from Romania, but she's working in Texas. And all my students are, most of them in Quebec, or a lot of them are in the armed forces, either in, most of them are in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on and so forth. And so, why would students come into my classroom? Well, the more and more people want to come into my classroom because they have a person-to-person relationship. Yeah. So, as we may have thought that technology would bring students out of the classroom into a virtual reality, the opposite is happening. People want to meet each other, they want to see each other. Mm-hmm. For example, the class I'm going to be giving tonight, I could have given it online with Skype. We could have high quality cameras as we have. We could have perfect image and high definition, perfect stereo. It's not the same thing if I'm talking to you, to see the reaction and so on and so forth.
Of course. But in your opinion, for example, even with generation changes, do you think this kind of behavior will continue? For example, face-to-face contact will be really necessary even with the millennials, for example?
Listen, when I was 20 years old, we had dial telephones in our homes. Mm-hmm. It was, I have an old one at my cottage, and my oldest one is 30 years old. I remember he was maybe 12 years old, and I asked him to call his grandfather, and the only phone that was working was the dial phone. He looked at it and he said, "How does it work?" Well, I said, you put your little finger and you turn the
Yes,
dial. He says,
I
that's
remember.
stupid. Why don't you just press the little buttons? Well, and so when the phones came up, well, we were 5 in the house and there was 1 phone. So we'd always be fighting about the phone. Then there came 2 phones and 3 phones and 4 phones, but that wasn't enough. Each has to have a line and everybody was on the phone. And there comes a time where you just say, well, forget the phone. You know, you get saturated. And any generation going through new technology, well, in my classroom, every student has a computer. We have wireless internet, high speed, the highest speed you can get. And I tell them, if you want to make fun of me on your computer, if you want to chat, go ahead, I don't care. It's your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And this will take long before they start turning off the computers. And listen, because I tell them, in business, you won't spend your days on computers. You have to discuss, you have to take a piece of paper, you have to start drawing a picture. And so I don't, for sure it's a question of generations, yes, but yeah, I guess there's some that are who are illiterate computer-wise. They can't even use a cell phone or whatever, but depends.
So summarizing, do you believe that this kind of way of teaching, for example, for distance education and face-to-face contact, they will just complement each other?
That's a very hard question because I know that at in Fort Worth, Texas, they've hired a company in Hollywood to write scripts for our class. They've hired professional actors. They spent $1 million a course. It's great. It's like watching a documentary on PBS or on any kind of TV show. But alas, I don't know, if you watch a TV show 5 years after the TV show, it's obsolete. You have to reinvest in another $1 million per course. Maybe money. For sure, branding has. Some would say, I read not long ago that one was predicting that 50% of business schools in the U.S. will close down in the next 5 years because of that. Because in the States it's so expensive to learn. If you're going to take your car and drive an hour to get to school, and if you can do it online, it's fine. So we're doing the same. And what we're realizing at that point is branding. So a smaller university that doesn't have our brand name may be very heavily affected by it. Yeah. But at the same time, our branding depends on the quality of what we're doing. Yes. So if online courses are going to be affecting the quality and affecting our branding, I don't know. So we're in that experimental thing. But what I can tell you is that we were the first ones online. We were the first university in Canada with so many online courses. What I've seen is in the last 3 years, the number of students coming to class has increased because they want to have the personal contact. The personal contact also with the teamwork. That is important. Maybe it's a question of time. I don't know. I don't think anybody has an answer. But I think that humans like to talk to each other and meet each other.
Okay. In considering the increasing of the number of startups and Singularity University, this kind of MOOCs, EDX, do you think, how do you think that will be the competitive scenario in the future?
It's we're at the research and development point. I know that the province of Ontario, which is the province next door to us, there are about 15 million people in Ontario. They've invested $40 million just on MOOCs, which is massive open online courses. And Laval will have 2. It's something that is challenging because I know that some universities have refused students and they've taken MOOCs. Mm-hmm. There's no prerequisites to follow it. And you pay as you use, so you're going to pay for an exam. You can pay to have some explanations. And they end up with an A+. And then they go on with 4 courses, and they go back to university and say, hey, I got 4 A+. How come you don't want to admit me? So it's, they have to rethink the whole thing.
Yeah. In your opinion, how higher education institutions should prepare themselves to operate in this future market? For example, taking the example of the MOOCs, about curricular change, the segmentation caused by nano-degrees, for example.
Well, the basic question here is, are universities businesses or not?
Exactly.
If you want to run the thing as a business, fair enough. But if you want to run it as a public service, that's another game.
Yeah, but privatization is increasing in almost all the countries, I think. So it's kind of reasonable
If
treatment.
we're looking at civilization and human beings,
Mhm.
we are all going through a phase of change. As we did when you look back at the Industrial Revolution, number one, with the steam machine, and then the analogical machines, mechanical machines with oil, and then electricity, and today with numeric. I don't know. I'm about to retire, it's your problem. You find a solution. And the solution comes from what the people want.
Okay.
But one thing for sure is that there's more and more standardization. If you look at only 50 years ago in Brazil, how people would dress, the same, and today you go, everybody's going around with jeans, they dress the same, they have the same kind of styles. The market is open for everybody on the internet. You can be a little, for example, and there's a little village where I spend my summers at my cottage, and there's a little company there, and they make wine cellars, and they sell them all over the world through the internet. They just got the contract for the World Trade Center new building in New York, $200,000 contract. They're in the middle of nowhere. Why did they manage to get it? It's because of the internet. So these issues are pretty new in our world, in our civilization. So and it's a clash of civilization. It's the Western world, it's Asia. The Western world, we're trying to find ourselves in this technology. Then there's the Middle East that are feeling threatened by our changes that are being imposed. Russia trying to get back into its position. Rogue states like North Korea. Countries like Japan, where the population is getting so old that people won't be able to retire until the age of 85 because they don't want to have any immigrants. They want to become old. They want to remain what they are. So it's, but I believe that there's one thing at the end of the day is that humans are humans. Girls will be girls and boys will be boys. It's as simple as that. And it depends how stupid we want to be and how intelligent we want to use our brains.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
No more one question.
Não, as 2 horas tem compromisso.
Oh, okay.
Well, you can write to me.
Okay.
Por e-mail. Por e-mail.
Okay.